Hi all, this is another episode of the HR Engage podcast, and I'm your host, Jonathan Mamaril, and with me today is Josh. How you going?
Jonathan, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me today, mate.
Josh, it's been a real pleasure to get to know you. And look, I'd love to just splurt out all the stuff you've done over your LinkedIn and go through all that line by line. I'd love to, but I think you'll do a better job. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. So look, I've been in the industry for about 18 years now, and fascinatingly enough, I actually started in safety and was in a very compliance-based, procedural-based place. Did my time in the safety industry, but thought, look, there's something more out there. And HR was knocking at my door, and I realized that the two things are very much similar. You're still working with people, you're convincing them to act differently, you're convincing them to act the same.
Yeah.
And the transition into HR was fantastic and so easy as well too. So I've been a dedicated HR professional for more than 10 years now. I've worked in big box retail through to hospitality, and now look after the HR function for a little company in Brisbane called Tritium, who build fast chargers for cars and export them to the world. So look, it's been a fascinating journey, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
I just want to pick up on a few things you said just there. So you came from a safety background and then moved more into the HR side. Can I ask you, like, why the transition? Was it by design? Was it by accident?
Yeah, look, I've always been commercially focused, and from a safety perspective, I was always been fascinated in behavioral-based safety. So not looking at a rule book and telling people to follow the rules, but looking at why people act in certain ways, and then working out, well, how that relates back to the business. And if you can work out, well, how people act and get the business to understand the people and the people understand the business, then you can influence behaviors and help people's wellness and safety at work. And from a HR perspective, it's not too much of a stretch. But from a HR perspective, there's so much more commercials involved in it, and it's not so much about compliance. It's more so much about the relationships, and so that's a significant difference between the two. But in essence, they're very much the same. You're still trying to influence, and you're still trying to get people, like I said before, to act in the same way or act in a different way.
And your journey's been a very interesting one. You've gone, retail, hospitality, and basically you're in technology now.
Yeah.
How's that been? Because 18 years in HR, it's a big period of time, but at different industries. How have you found that adjustment? We've just really done that adjustment with health and safety to HR. How did you find that adjustment in terms of industries?
Yeah, look, people talk about renaissances and, especially from a career perspective. And I spent a large amount of the start of my career in a retail sphere, and you cut your teeth in retail. You either make it or you don't. It's a high stakes, high energy environment, dealing with, certain types of customers and certain types of people. And I got to the stage where it was ready for a change. And the high tech industry has a different type of people, different types of challenges as well. It's been a wonderful opportunity to hone some skills I haven't used in the retail sphere, but then also to use those skills in that past career history as well, and just fine tune them as well. So it's a wonderful opportunity, as I said, to change things up a little bit while still understanding that your craft is still the same.
And what skills do you specifically talk about? Like what skills are you talking about there?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a retail perspective, commerciality is number one. And retail is, like I said, you cut your teeth on it, but it's also a very cutthroat industry where you either make it in retail or you don't. And we can see that from, the recent changes in the retail environment in Australia with, significant retailers ceasing to exist. So as a safety professional, as a HR professional, you need to be 100% on top of your metrics, and you need to be understanding exactly how what you do day in, day out influences the outcomes of the business. There isn't any space for people to be passengers on that journey. And I was lucky enough to learn early on in my career just how important people like us in our industry are, in terms of the success or the failure of the business as well. Having the seat at that table and being part of the commercials of the business is so vitally important. And you're able to take, or I was able to take, those learnings from that early career, and then amplify that and then use that in those different industries as well.
It's very fascinating to hear your journey of in HR, because you've got obviously the health and safety background, but then you've also got the different industries that you've moved through. Um, have you also thought about how that's worked in terms of your overall, professional development? Has that sort of shaped your professional development as you've gone through?
Yeah, there's different types of HR practitioners out there. Like I always say, like there's many colors in the rainbow. There's many ways that people apply that HR craft to
Yeah.
their careers. And I guess from my personal perspective, having that commercial lens and having that understanding about how much we can influence has been such a significant advantage. So look, it's been a fascinating journey, and I think there are HR practitioners out there that are very skilled at a compliance based open book closed book approach, and there's important places for those people, and there's important places for people that are highly commercial, and there's important places for people that are the people. Businesses need all types of HR people out there, and it doesn't matter what part of HR you come from. The most important thing is understanding your own superpowers and then finding businesses who can use those superpowers to their advantages and make that match made in heaven.
So you talk about those superpowers. Where do you see your superpowers, you personally?
Yeah, so look, I think back to my childhood, and one of my earliest memories was electrocuting myself on a clock radio when I think I was
Wow,
5 years old. So
jeez.
it's one of those things, and all throughout my childhood, I actually went into engineering of all things, and
Yep.
you realize that sometimes the things you grow up with, like taking things apart and understanding how things work, you naturally, go into engineering. But I realized midway through my uni career that my superpowers weren't in taking physical things apart. It was understanding people and understanding processes and understanding systems and things. And when you take them apart, you understand how they work and you can understand how they might be improved or how they might be broken and fixed as well too. So look, if you talk about my personal superpower, it's understanding people, it's understanding processes and then improving them. And like I said, there is a need for that in businesses, and there's a need for other people with other types of superpowers in different businesses as well too. But I've been lucky that I've understood my superpowers quite early. um, and it sounds cliched, but you don't think or you don't feel like you're working when you're doing something that firstly you're good at, but secondly
Yeah.
that you get that result and you realize that what you do is actually making a real tangible difference in the industry, but also the people you work with.
You've got a long HR journey, but also very there's a lot of variety there. But what's kept you in HR all these years? Why not move to something else? What's kept you in HR all these years?
Yeah, on one side, there's the things that we just talked about, where when you find something that you're good at, you stay there. But the other thing is that HR is this beautiful industry where no 2 days are the same. And you
Mm.
don't get many jobs where there's a huge variety of tasks and challenges that you come up with, because our job is about people, and people are varied and nuanced and have many quirks that we're consistently dealing with. But then layered over the top of that, we have an industry which is in consistent flux, because our industry is influenced consistently by changes in governments, changes in legislation,
Yes.
changes in technology as well too. So you stay in the industry because you're super engaged in what you're doing. But then, like I said before, every day is something different, and it's accelerating. So the things that I used to find myself doing 5, 10 years ago, very different from now. And I think society as a whole and our lives as well are accelerating at such greater pace. Every year things are getting more busy and more busy. And going back to the question, it keeps me in the industry because it keeps me engaged. There's always a new challenge. There's never anything boring in the HR world to sit on and to not have anything to do with.
You talk about HR having, I suppose, this change, or there's been a lot of change. Some of it's forced, some of it's some evolution, some of it has come from changing ideas and theories. And you even talked about how even 5 years ago things are completely different from five years ago, or at least you do things a little bit differently. Talking about the HR landscape as you see it today, are there aspects that you see there can be more major changes than other? Are there some other major changes coming already here that you think are going to change the HR landscape?
Yeah, there's probably two main ones. There's one that's quite a clear one from a sociological perspective, where the world is evolving and the world's value sets is evolving as well too. You think of pre-COVID times, the world was a very different place, and people's values were very different. You look at the research now about telecommuting, working from home, all those workplace flexibility that we see consistently. If we ask the same question about a person's value for working from home 5 or 10 years ago, people would have laughed at you that there was an opportunity to sit at your desk at home and do your work. But now it seems like it's a given.
Yeah.
So society by itself is moving at a hugely great pace, not only just from a workplace rights perspective, but from a human value perspective. If we look at what candidates value when they're looking for new roles, 5, 10 years ago, that's vastly different.
Yeah.
And we're talking about a blink of an eye in terms of, you look at the previous generation still in the workforce, their value set when they were in, our age of their careers was vastly different as well too. So, sociologically, there's huge changes, but in the last 2 years, the advent of large language models and AI and the internet being in our pockets and TikTok driving this 5 second human attention span changes things dramatically as well too. So we've almost got this 1-2 punch where on one side we've got society moving forward in ways that we never could have imagined. And then on the other side, we've got technology that's changing how we interact not only with our co-workers and our peers and our candidates that are working for us, but also from ourselves. Our own attention spans are changing as well. It's a fascinating time to be alive, and it's horrifying as well too, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's what a lot of people in the HR community feel about, AI and technology, that there's this sense of both anticipation and dread, potentially both in equal measure. Your thoughts on, artificial intelligence? How do you believe it will help or hinder, but more help the HR community?
I'll give you an example from this morning. So one thing that HR professionals really need to be on top of is knowing really simple stuff about, whose birthday is it today, whose birthday is it tomorrow, who's got a work anniversary coming up. And these are traditional things where you jump into HRIS or jump into, your Excel documents and run your reports and then set calendar invites and everything like that. In the space of an hour using ChatGPT, I set up an automated system that queries our HRIS and then sends a Microsoft Teams message to us every morning about the upcoming birthdays. Now, this is a thought bubble that I had driving into work, thinking about, well, what would make our lives easier? And this 1 second thought as I was driving in got turned into reality. People are threatened by this, but it represents, or people may be threatened by this, but it represents such a huge opportunity for our industry. Not in those obvious ways where you're thinking about, that AI candidate screening or anything like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's a massive personal unlocker where you can have these dreams where you might have to previously spin up a project and integrate with IT and systems people. You've now got HR practitioners such as myself that have this thought bubble and it becomes a reality in hours' time. So change in the HR sphere driven by, these large language models or AI is accelerating at such a pace that we never would have dreamed of. And it's allowing us to do amazing and cool stuff. So on one side, I absolutely agree. There's a sense of dread from people about it coming in and changing the landscape. And to that, I'd say, well, absolutely it is. Without a doubt, it's changing the landscape. So is everything else in our lives at the moment. And you've got two options. One, you can stay and keep on doing what you're doing. And that's a very valid option. People are welcome to do that. People do that. That's fine. The other option is you can adopt and move at pace. And I've personally found when you adopt and move at pace, you can achieve some amazing things. And you can achieve things that, Josh from 2 years ago never would have dreamed about, and doing these things in an hour or less, throughout the day.
That's so interesting that, I mean, obviously you are working in technology right now. Like, you're in a technology company. But you've also come from more traditional type industry background.
Mm.
Do you think that viewpoint on AI is colored because of where you're working, or do you think that the application is widespread across industries, across different types of platforms? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm in a bit of a dangerous position where I've got an inquisitive mind and I've got a mind that consistently problem solves, right? So,
Yeah.
those late night sessions when you're like, well, what if dangerous things happen? Um, so, yeah, I
Good
don't think
things
it's
can happen too, Josh. Good
yeah,
things can happen
yeah,
too.
yeah, exactly right. So, look, you're exactly right. I did come from an industry that is traditionally very slow moving, and by way of example, close to 10 years ago, working with businesses like Target,
Mm.
their HR reporting was sent out, in PDF, and it was a month in arrears. Now, obviously, systems have changed and things have vastly improved
Yeah.
since then, but even back then, I was thinking, well, how can we improve this? How can we give store managers almost real time information versus having to look at reports that are a month and potentially even older to make decisions based on people right here and now. So yeah,
Mm.
look, it's not based on the industry because there's still disruptors in any industry.
Yes.
Um, and it's just like I said when we started, it's fitting the industry to or fitting the person to the role. And if you can do that, you can do amazing things. So, even working back with, Wesfarmers and Target and the Kmart guys, they were super receptive of these crazy ideas that we were able to achieve. Even back then with the very basis of automation, because we made that commercial argument and they were receptive to the commercials of what we were trying to achieve. So yeah, it's every industry has the opportunity to change and evolve. It's just understanding the unlockers for that industry and making the appropriate representations that what we're trying to do is not for the sake of AI or for the sake of XYZ, whatever the new trend is.
Yeah.
We're making these changes because we want to help them be more successful. We want to help our people be more happy at work. We want to help, the businesses change the world if that's what their mission is. It doesn't matter the industry. It matters about the person and, aligning those two goals together.
It sounds like you believe that um, AI is really going to change the way HR is undertaken in a business. So I suppose the question is, will AI replace HR jobs?
Look, AI has the opportunity to change HR and businesses. There still will be businesses that have HR coordinators, HR advisors, HR people coming out their ears because the business is okay with that, the people are okay with that, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said when we started, there's always the opportunity for people to fit to businesses, business to fit to people. I think the businesses that are interested in disrupting and can see the power in this have the opportunity. And it's not something to be concerned about. It's something to actually think, well, it's actually a superpower. The things that I talked about, bringing ideas to reality in the space of an hour, that's just with ChatGPT. We're not
Mm.
even talking about deep integration of HR systems and AI systems where we can get insights in an instant. I remember, working with Culture Amp many years ago with their amazing survey tools where they would build word clouds of what people are saying. Can you imagine these verbatim survey responses being fed into a large language model and there being instant manager insights driven that are specifically tailored towards those managers built on the knowledge of humanity? It's insane and it blows your mind what can be achieved in terms of the dread that some HR practitioners feel. I think there's a natural evolution where systems can automate, systems will
Yeah.
automate. You saw it in the Industrial Revolution. We've seen it many stages throughout humanity. People were really concerned about the self checkouts in the Coles and the Woolworths. That was a major disruptor, and the world has moved on. This is the exact same thing where we're going to see some roles in HR be consumed by automations, improving technology, AI, anything. But
Yeah.
HR can move on, and people, if they're cognizant of these changes, can actually use them to their advantage and change themselves as HR practitioner for the better. Because not only are we talking about HR coordinators and HR advisors being coordinators advisors, we're talking about HR advisors now being able to run and suggest business strategies to senior leaders because they have the world at their fingertips. Obviously keeping in mind all of the privacy concerns that
Yeah.
we'll just pretend are not there right now. But for the purposes of the discussion,
Yeah.
Upskilling is not a thing anymore when people can self-serve the world's knowledge about everything and then apply it to their everyday role.
It seems like there's going to be a balancing act for HR professionals going forward. Obviously, there's a balancing act with the commercial side of things, balancing act with the changing workforce. You sort of mentioned that with the changing needs of a workforce. There's obviously AI and technology. From your perspective, because I know you've got that more human-centric perspective on HR, where do you think human resource are going to find that balance, and how they're going to find that balance?
Yeah, I think the balance comes in the things that technology can't offer. And when I talk about technology, I'm talking about all the catchy phrases that everyone has come up with and will come up with. There always will be technology and automation in our lives. There's one thing about our craft, and that's the human nuance, like the nuances of what makes up a person, what makes them do things, and human behaviors. So from the very beginnings of my career, I was always taught when, I studied, psych at uni, that humans do things for a reason. People are driven by motivators. Technology, catchphrase, whatever you want to say, it will never understand those individual driving contributors for person's behavior. And that applies to HR, that applies to any industry that involves trying to get people to do something or trying to get them to stop doing something. It's all about understanding people. And I don't think any types of technology or automations or AI or anything like that will ever understand how humans work. And they can always respond to humans. We see some amazing results currently with, the ChatGPT voice mode, where you genuinely think you speak to a human, but it doesn't understand you. It doesn't understand what's driving, your words. And that's something that a practitioner, like a HR practitioner, can only understand. Now, we might see industries that are complemented by technology, but I think that core element of HR about having that conversation with a person and connecting with a person and working with them, that's always going to be there.
Folks, to change gears a little bit, there's a lot of early HR career professionals listening to this podcast. What I want to take you back. If you could just time travel and go talk to an early career HR Josh, what would you say to Josh then?
Look, I think one thing that's really important for early, HR career practitioners is to understand the power of storytelling. Our lives are so busy at the moment, and our lives are changing so quickly. Yet, that ancient art of the cavemen and the cave women of sitting around a campfire and telling stories, and you look at all of that history since then. That art form about storytelling and invoking emotions through a story is so critically important. And by way of example, for people that may not believe the logic there, you look at any marketing campaign and you pick a successful marketing campaign that doesn't tug on human heartstrings.
Yeah.
Because stories invoke emotion and emotion changes behaviors. And if young people these days, look at us go. Young people these days are tech focused, have a phone glued to their face. They understand tech. I'm not going to go to an early career HR person and say you need to understand AI, because they're going to understand AI many times better than whatever will. My 5-year-olds, my 8-year-olds are coding currently. I mean, wow. But it doesn't matter what changes. Storytelling and human emotions will never change. And I think if you can nail, looking at that data, looking at your analytics, and then understanding what story that's trying to tell you, and then evoking that into emotions for your business partners, for your leaders,
Yeah.
you've got something more powerful than any tech could ever create.
That that telling a story or storytelling is such an art, that I think people potentially don't understand. That's actually can be it's actually a skill. Like there is art. There's definitely an art to it. There's definitely flavor to it. There's creativity to it, but it's also a skill that can be harnessed and learned. We look at. I was talking to a guy the other day, and we were talking about boxing. You know,
Mm.
but the reality with boxing is, if no one wants to see you, whether you win or lose, doesn't matter. It's whether they want you to win, whether they want you to lose, whether they want to boo you or cheer you. You want them to evoke some feeling. Doesn't matter what the feeling is, but some feeling. Seems like that's a case with pretty much anything. The worst, what you don't want them to do, is have no reaction at all. Like that's the worst. Like the neutral reaction, basically not caring, the apathy.
And that's such the unlocker where I speak to professionals that are having challenges where they say, I'm not getting a seat at the table.
Mm,
My executives are not talking to me. They should talk to me because, I'm HR. They need HR at the table. Well,
yeah,
do they? Have you given them a good reason as to why you should be there? Have you given them the logic into what you can achieve? Or do you just expect because you're wearing a HR badge, you naturally get a seat at the table because everyone needs HR? We have to fight for every time that we get to speak to our CEOs, our executives, our directors, and make ourselves relevant, because if we don't have relevancy, and one way of being relevant is obviously invoking those emotions and arguing
yeah.
that story about what we can bring. But if we don't do that, if we don't fight for that, there's no use turning up to work, because nobody's going to want to involve the HR person in a discussion when there's no reason to. So it's so vitally important, not just for when you are sitting in front of a team and you're trying to tell them a story, but for getting through that door to actually get the opportunity as well too.
So, in your view, does that help with proactivity and to eventually get that seat at the table? Well, firstly, I'll bring it down a level. In your view, is it important for HR to have a seat at the table, to have that prime influence on decision makers?
I've been in businesses where there is a seat at the table. I've been in businesses where there's not a seat at the table. I gravitate towards businesses where there's a general interest in what HR can bring,
Mm,
because you only have so much energy in a day. And sometimes trying to convince executives that HR can offer all these things, you will do that, but then your entire being is trying to convince people about what you can offer.
yeah.
So having that seat at the table is obviously so vitally important, but there needs to be some sort of interest in what HR can offer.
So, what do you say to those who are listening right now, who are in, maybe they've been in HR for a while, or they're in an organization where they've got their own HR team, but they don't necessarily have a seat at the table? What do you have to say to them?
It's about whether or not it works for you. If
Mm,
if you're in a role where you don't, and that's okay, and cool, happy days. Like it's not up to us. It's not our job to try and convince you that HR definitely need a seat at the table. Or what I'm saying is, from my perspective, if I'm trying to invoke change, because you look at everything we've spoken to up now, we're talking about significant and vast change. If that's what you're trying to go for, you can't invoke change from afar. You can't invoke change when you aren't speaking to your senior leaders and helping them drive that change as well too. You can't invoke
yeah.
change by yourself. It's exhausting. So working arm in arm with leaders in a true business partnering sense is the only way to invoke change. However, if we're just doing standard HR and signing contracts and paying people and we're okay with that, then cool. Like, don't think that there's anything wrong with that, because
Yeah.
as long as you're okay with that, as long as the business is okay with that, that's cool. But look, if you want to be a change maker, you've got to kick down that door, and you've got to business partner with people who are genuinely passionate about changing the world.
I want to take that point that you said about if you want to be a change maker, that seems to be the crossroads I see with HR right now, where for a very long time, there was, of course, HR's got lots of hats, but one big hat is the compliance hat. There's compliance piece. There seems to be this almost like a turn here, as there's a focus more on, say, things like wellness, and there's new IR laws, and there's technology coming, and technology's here, but changing generations, changing workforce needs. There seems to be this precipice that we're on, and I like that point you say about if you want to be a change maker. How do you, Josh, define that as being a change maker in human resources?
So it's about not being happy with where we're currently at.
Yep.
It's about being surrounded by people who are also not happy about where we're at. And it's about jointly as a team deciding to do something different. Because I've never seen a change maker where they're a single person affecting change. Change has to come from leaders understanding and agreeing with you about what you're trying to achieve. Change needs to come from leaders being guided by, a HR professional who can understand about, the core tenets of how to affect that change. I've never seen, like I said, a single change maker making change. They're always surrounded by amazing people. So, the vitally important part is surrounding yourself with your guiding coalition, with your people that are crazy enough to want to mix things up a little bit, and going on that journey. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work, but it's super exciting regardless, because there's nothing like being surrounded by the energy of people who aren't satisfied and they want something better.
That's such a good point that you made there about you haven't really, you never seen a single person being, that singular change maker. I see the celebrity of it, where we see the celebrity of, that person, or that person that's wrote a book, or that wrote a theory. But the reality is, if you look into it much deeper, it is built on many other theories. And those theories are built on other philosophies, and even your leaders that we see is built off different mentors and different viewpoints. It's such an interesting point to make, because I think with change makers, or change, or any type of change, the reality is change is here, change is coming. I think most of us understand the reality is here.
And I think it's also important to realize that it's controversial to say one person can't affect change, because it evokes the motion, how dare you? Of course one person can create change. I draw your attention back to the Dancing Man video, the famous HR video that we always roll out when we're talking about something new, where there's one crazy guy dancing at a festival and everyone's looking around him and going, what on earth's wrong with this person? And people would say that the dancing man evoked change. He was the single man that was dancing. And I say to you, well, I totally agree. But if he kept on being the only guy dancing, there would be no change. A single person can never affect change. A single person to become a change maker needs to evoke a bunch of people to start that change. So I think it's really important never to think that, well, I can never evoke change because I'm only a single person. Well, no. What I'm getting at is that if you're the only person who's trying to make change, and you remain the only person who's trying to make change, and you're only the other person that's going to do it, I haven't really seen that before. I've always seen people, you have to be that crazy dancing guy for a little bit, but you've got to get your guided coalition around you, or you're not going to, you're going to run out of energy, and you're going to stop dancing and sit down and keep on watching the concert, right?
And that seems to me, then, you need to build the ability to build trust, build relationship, build connections, the ability to persuade. Like, those skills then become even more vitally important to human resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we get back to when we're talking about, the nuances of understanding people. You can't invoke change through typing into a prompt window. You have to understand about, the many things that make up people, and the many layers of people where you can weave your magic with them to help them, come on board and to make that change with you as well.
Is there any other big piece of advice you would have for any person in human resources right now, or who's currently in human resources?
Look, I'd say the young people. I've talked about storytelling. I'd
Yes.
say people our age and in our state is that there is so much opportunity to learn and become more than what we are. And
Mm,
10 years ago, I would have talked about it being Google, and right now, I'm talking about it being ChatGPT. I have learned more through generally being inquisitive than I have in the past 10 years of my career. I've achieved more in the past 12 months than I have in the past 10 years of my career, and it's all down to the fact that I have my own skill set, I have my own journey that I've built over my career, but can you imagine then having an assistant that has the complete knowledge of humanity as well? Now, keeping in mind, this doesn't mean that you just use this AI and don't worry about the results. You've got to use it as an assistant. Always as an assistant. But my only piece of advice to people in our stage of career is you know, you've got to have that tools and use those tools consistently to your advantage, because if you're not, somebody else is, and they're going to
mm,
be more efficient than you and faster than you, and they're going to be more successful than you. And like we said before, if we're okay with where we're at, that's cool. Like happy days, like no dramas at all. But if something's eating away at you inside where I want to be better, I want to be faster, I want to be more efficient, I want to have a more efficient, ruthless, amazing team, then you've got to think about what you've got to do differently, right? And getting with the whole AI agenda is one of those parts of the puzzle.
I want to take that thought further a bit, because we've probably talked about some of the challenges that HR are dealing with, but what do you think is the biggest challenge you're facing now in human resources, and how are you tackling it?
I'm starting to get when we engage with our clients,
Yes.
um, I'm starting to get clients coming back with um, obviously generated AI responses.
Oh,
And the interesting thing with that, and that's fine. We
yeah.
type an email, we stick it into whatever Copilot or whatever your flavor of the month is, and it makes it beautiful. Cool, happy days. But it started giving people employment law advice, and
Mm,
the employment law advice is wrong.
yes.
And a lot of people blindly trust these large language models, but you've got to realize that there's no context in these models. They might pick and choose different pieces of legislation. And so um, that's been a significant change in where we've gone to, where we could assume that we use our knowledge base, we talk to people with their knowledge base, we come to a sort of resolution. But now we're
Right.
up against people who are vigorously defending viewpoints that are guided by a language model that's factually incorrect.
Mm,
And it's only going to get worse, because we know about people who get out of parking tickets using large language models, and all power to them. But when we're trying to have an employment conversation with a person that's being guided with factually incorrect information,
yep.
that's a challenge in itself that we as a business and we as a an industry have never faced before.
Yeah, I suppose the thing is, we've faced it to an extent with people using Google, right? Like we've or a search on the web, but in some respects, you had to know a little bit more about what to search for and how to search. AI tools like a Chat GPT make that a lot more easier. However, you're right. There's information that's just brought out of context, and there's also hallucinated cases, and
Mm,
sometimes even just incorrect incorrect interpretation, like
absolutely.
full stop. Like, no context is just wrong.
Correct.
But I see what you're saying, which is whether it's right or wrong. The issue is that people are utilizing that to make arguments that in the true context is illogical, but for them it's a very logical argument, which if from their perspective is very logical, and that's a very hard one to overcome, because accept. Sorry,
Mm,
uh, there's obviously an ultimate way to overcome that. Of course, there's a judge says that's just wrong. That's the
Absolutely. But
that's your ultimate.
you think about the relationship that people, and for people that don't understand what I'm talking about, it's going to sound really weird, but
Yes.
you think about the relationship people are building with ChatGPT, the amount of people online that are saying, I can't get access to mental health services, and
Mm,
ChatGPT has helped me immensely. I can't get a partner. I now talk to ChatGPT like it's my partner. I
yeah.
can't make a recipe work for a Thermomix because I've got the old school recipe. People are building a relationship with an AI model
Mm,
to the point where they trust it with stuff that doesn't matter whether it's factually correct or not.
yes. Yes.
But now, because you inherently trust something, it's like them getting advice from Jonathan, the lawyer extraordinaire, and then the employer going back, going, doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
You'd think that
Yes.
this person, he knows so much, and you've got to not only have the conversation about the employment law problem at hand, but you've
Yeah.
then got to unpick the fact that they're vigorously defending this position that's obviously wrong. And you don't want things to go further. Like, you want
No.
to resolve things before you have to sit in front of a commission. But I'm really scared that we're going to go that way, where people are starting to get advice from these things that might be right and might be wrong. And it's just going to increase our workload as well. But once again, it comes down to human nuances, understanding people and being able them to trust you and you to trust them, and you to be able to say, look, I know what you're trying to achieve here. Let's use our human relationship that we've built to unpick this problem. And that's when we talk about, is AI taking over the world? Is AI going to take away HR? Well, no, because the conversation fixes all those problems that it's created.
The mindset seems to be an issue as well, because I think, and I mean mindset from everyone, like too trusting of AI or technology, and I suppose distrusting. You almost have two extremes. From a HR perspective, what mindset shift do HR teams need to thrive in this sort of technology enabled future?
You've got to understand the context of how it's built, why it's built, and where it offers these opportunities. So I've seen HR teams where we're putting all of our candidate resumes through some sort of large language model where it compares it to the position description. Now, the funny thing is that the candidates now are also using large language models to write their cover letter and their CV based on your position description. So I've spoken to recruiters where their lives have been turned upside down now, because their AI matching system has now put all of those candidates at 100% perfect matches, because it's their AI talking to the candidate's AI, and they can't understand why there's a big problem.
Yes.
Now, I've also seen it used in really cool ways, like I said before, uploading anonymized and obviously de-identified survey information, where you can't make a head or tails of it, but a large language model can. And
Yeah.
that's where the power comes in, where it can understand all of the words in those sequences and then give you those inferences, where traditionally as a HR practitioner, you'd be, like I said, trying to do word clouds and trying to do, graphs and auto adjustable too. So you've got to understand what it is. You've got to understand what it can offer, and not use it for the wrong thing, because you're actually going to go backwards. And if there's one thing that's worse than going backwards, it's using it in ways that it shouldn't be used and being found out. And I cringe for the day of the data breach at, Copilot, Google, OpenAI, where we find all of the text that's ever been written into ChatGPT in the wild. And I'm horrified at the amount of confidential data that's going in there. So, I said before, we have to assume that HR practitioners using this are using it in a responsible way, where we're protecting the identity and the privacy of all the people. Because if we don't, it's going to be a scary outcome, I think.
I mean, that's obviously one of the biggest challenges that we're going to see going forward with technology. Going on, looking at human resources, what's the one thing about human resource that people might disagree with you about?
Look, it's going to be the same theme as we've talked about for the past 40 minutes, right? It's the fact that how could you use AI to draft a letter? And my response to that is, well, Not only did I do that, but with the 2 hours I saved, I went and spoke to some senior leaders about how they interact with their people.
Yeah.
And I think people, like you said, are either diametrically opposed to the AI logic, or they love it and they almost overuse it.
Yes. Yes.
But I think what people would disagree with me about is saying this is such a powerful tool, but not in ways that you think it is. It's a powerful tool in the way that if you use it correctly, it's a huge unlocker for our personal time. And for that reason, I would suggest that we as a HR industry need to embrace this a lot more than we're currently doing, because what we're doing is we're waiting for the systems we use to embrace it. We're waiting for
Yes.
the culture amps and the automated systems to say, oh, now we use AI, job adders using AI. Great, but what are we doing as practitioners to try and get ahead of the bell curve and unlock our time to be more strategic in other ways?
Do you believe that that's the key, that the unlocking of time from a HR perspective means you can spend more time on the relationship building, the human-centric side of things, which in some respect, so we know is time intensive. So we know that's time intensive. Do you think that is where it's going to go going forward for HR? That's where the focus has to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I talked about previously, we're now seeing HR coordinators, HR advisors not having to do the admin heavy parts of their role. And they're not going to replace that with, chattering and having teas and coffees. They're going to replace that if they're driven, going out and speaking to, their teams, their leaders, their departments about things that are passionate to them. So there's a huge unlocker in terms of time. And that's one thing as an industry that HR has always been poor for, because when you peel away all the layers, all the strategy and all the nice to haves, we are a core admin function. And that's what we do. We do contracts, we do reference checks, we do performance management, we offboard people. Yeah. If you can automate aspects of that and unlock time, I've seen already in the past 6 months what can be achieved. I've seen people at advisor level start to act like business partners because they have internal drives and their time's been unlocked by AI. Yep. So I absolutely agree. Time is this huge unlocker that's going to allow everyone in the industry, if they want to take a step up. And amazing and wild things are going to be achievable by people when they have more time to have those human conversations, to have those human connections and bring people along for that journey to affect that change that they may want to be implementing.
Josh, we have a tradition here on the HR Engage podcast. I ask a whole pile of rapid fire questions. You just answer the first thing that comes to your mind. How's that sound?
Dangerous.
Well, do you remember, Josh? This is a PG podcast, all right? Just keep that in mind, all right?
Hit me. Let's go.
What is your favorite movie?
The Martian.
Oh, yes. Matt Damon?
Matt Damon. There's a new one coming out. I don't think it's going to be as good, but the reason I love it is that he fixes problems like HR practitioners, and he's sarcastic like all the best HR practitioners as well.
Excellent. Favorite holiday destination?
Look, anywhere camping. I've got young kids and a wonderful wife who loves camping. So anywhere camping with the family.
Is there any particular place around town that you like?
Oh, look, there's a secret place. I can't disclose it. There's a secret place that about an hour away from Brisbane. And all the happiest memories are made there as well too. So look, I loved, traveling before kids. Life changes with kids, and it is what it is. But look, as long as there's beer and nice food, and some sort of 4G or 5G signal, we'll be fine.
Brilliant. I mean, there's a dichotomy there, but let's just leave that for a second. Okay, brilliant. Apart from family and friends, who has inspired you the most?
My YouTube history is amazing. I always end up going back to the Steve Jobs video when he uncovered the iPhone. And I know this is not rapid fire at all, but Steve Jobs convinced everyone to move away from Blackberries. And he was the craziest, most amazing presentation. And, if people have the opportunity, go and have a look at the presentation where he introduces the iPhone 1. amazing human being. Super sad that he's not around anymore, but he changed the world, and
Yeah.
him and his team changed the world, and you never take that away from him.
What is the thing you do outside of work that you're passionate about or keeps you going?
Like I said, I'm a disruptor. So I'm currently working on automating my house. And what I try and do is I try and automate things that my wife's approval of is high. So it's a high wife approval rating, as we talk about.
Yes.
I failed recently. I currently have all the speakers around the house announcing what aircraft are going over the top of the house because my
Yeah.
kids love it. My wife hates it,
Yeah,
but
I
that's
could
what I do
see.
outside of work.
Yeah, I could see. I could see that was problematic. Yes.
Yeah, it's the shortest marriage in the world, Jonathan.
Tell us something about yourself that people don't know about you.
Look, I'm a failed microelectrical engineer. Like I said, I started engineering at uni, but the reason I dropped out of uni is I almost electrocuted myself in one of the labs, and
Wow.
then walked into a psychology lecture the very next day, and the rest was history. So, it's not my proudest moment, but it helped me get to where I am today.
It's been such a fascinating discussion, but I just want to close off with a few closing questions that we usually ask our guests, Josh. And if you could recommend a book, movie, TV show, or podcast to listeners, what would it be and why?
Look, TV show Severance, absolutely.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Lots of people disagree. I think it's not only the theme, but the fact that so much care and precision has been put into making it. So it's actually a multi-layered reason.
Yes.
A book from a professional hat on, Chief Maker by Greg Layton. It's almost 10 years old now. It still rings true to me. It set me on my journey. It was given to me by my first HR manager
Wow.
when I was coming up. And, I've still got it home. And there's a lovely note written in the front that I still, flick through and I read back to. And it talks about how you get a seat at that executive table. And that's helped me all the way through my career, interact, help, engage, influence. Fascinating book, great guy. He's got a podcast as well too.
And apart from family and friends, who has inspired you the most?
Look, it's going to sound cliched. I work with a fantastic bunch of people, and I have worked with a fantastic bunch of people throughout my long career. There are every single person I've worked with inspires me in different ways, and I think a lot of people will pick some American influencer or famous mountain climber or something like that, but one of the beautiful things in our industry is we work with a bunch of amazing people who are each going through their own challenges and each having their own successes and each going through their own journeys. And it's such an amazing honor to be part of all of their journeys, but then also they don't realize it, that they influence me and who I've become as a HR professional through all of my interactions with them, leading up to, this very point in time. So yeah, a bit of like I said, a cliched answer, but there's logic behind it. So I'm sure I could sneak it through.
Yeah, you could go through this to the keeper. I think that's not too bad, Josh. Is there a quote or a moment of inspiration you'd like to leave us with?
Oh, there's always the traditional, it's like the dancing man thing. You've seen it written everywhere. It's not what you say, it's how you make people feel, and people throw it around quite a lot. But when you think about it in our context, you think about people that are looking to work with us. Candidates. It's not the job ad, it's how you make them feel. You look at the interview, it's how you make them feel. You look at every interaction you have when you're going through a performance management or some sort of yucky conversation. That's always rung true to me in every facet of my life. And it continues to. And it's one of the most timeless quotes because it's 100% true.
It's so interesting having this. I mean, I could talk to you for hours, really. I could, Josh. But I think from what we discussed today, there's just so many ways, or there's many ways that sort of meandered. Your journey obviously has, set the framework. You come from that engineering background. Yes, you electrocuted yourself a few times, but you got to a stage where you moved through different industries, and you're now in technology. But because of that inquisitive mind, it's almost given you a lease of life, especially in this current state of play, where technology and AI in particular are going to play a huge part in change for HR. But in saying that, it's almost like a dichotomy, because there's one part of that which is quite strong with you, but on the other side, you've got that whole idea of, what people feel, that
Yeah,
whole the feel, and that nuance is actually probably going to be not just important but integral going forward for HR, and that combining that inquisitive mind, combining that with the current technology state of affairs we have right now, and that ability that you want, to understand how people feel about things and the nuances of those connections. You can absolutely understand your philosophy on where you see HR is right now, but also going forward, and that sort of layers your decision making and the way you do things. I think it's so interesting to hear it from that perspective, because I think a lot of we had a lot of podcast guests here who in mostly senior roles in human resources, who have talked about things in different perspectives, but I think you're probably the only one so far that's talked about it from a understanding, embracing the technology is one part, but understanding that there's actually a huge other part there that we have to be, really massage and hone and turn that into a big benefit. Because the technology and that together doesn't seem, in your view at least, doesn't it just, if you can't put that together, that's going to be a massive problem.
Yeah, exactly. The very greatest people, in all industries are people that take holistic approaches. And that's the only way to solve problems. You can't solve problems, running at a wall in a certain way. You've got to think about all the different ways that you can, break down those walls. And, it's a consistent journey. And I haven't got it right yet. I'll get it right as I go, and we're all on journeys.
Josh Campbell, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the HR Engage podcast. Thank you so much, mate.
Pleasure's all mine. Have a great day.
Well, I'm Jonathan Mamaril with another HR Engage podcast episode. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, share with the HR community. Make sure that get that message out to all those people in HR. Listen to this channel, and hopefully I will see you at the next one. I'm Jonathan Mamaril signing off. Speak soon.